Hello everyone. Today we'll look into the NMR spectroscopy, how it is applied in pharmaceutical analysis. Right. So this is the spectral method in pharmaceutical analysis, where we are applying the NMR spectroscopic method. So we know that every atom has a nucleus which has got its own charge, that is, nucleus having a positive charge, and it spins, the proton spins on its own axis. So there is a nuclear charge and a spin on it, so that makes it to be a tiny magnet. Right? So the nucleus, the proton acts as a tiny magnet. So this magnetic nature, or this magnetic moment of the proton, can be in any direction. The spin can be in different orientations, kind of thing, right? So when this nuclear spin, or when it is subjected to an external magnetic field of a strength beta naught, right? It's an external magnet. So in presence of an external magnetic field, the nucleus spins undergo alignment. Either the alignment is inline, parallel to the applied magnetic field, or it is opposite to it, that is anti-parallel to the applied opposing to it, anti-parallel to the applied external magnetic field. So this alignment of the nuclear spin with respect to the external magnetic field is a basis for the nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy. Right? So when the nuclear spins align, we said there are two types of alignment. There is a parallel inline alignment, and there is an opposite alignment, that is anti-parallel to the external magnetic field. And the spin state which is aligning to the external magnetic field is having the lower energy one, low energy nuclear spin state, which is given as +12, and the one which is aligning anti-parallel to the applied magnetic field, it is a higher energy spin state, that is given as -12. Right? So alpha, this is beta, right? Two states. So as the strength of the external magnetic field increases, the energy difference between the two states also increases. So you can see, as the strength of the magnetic field, applied magnetic field, is increasing, the energy difference between the two spin state is also increasing. Right? So the energy difference between aligned and opposed spins in presence of external magnetic field, that is beta naught, is generally small and is dependent upon beta naught. So when you apply an electromagnetic radiation to this spin state, that is a region of radio frequency, radio waves is applied, it causes the flip of the nuclear spin into the opposite nature. That is, a spin of the flip occurs for this particular nuclei, and this is called as the resonance. Means the flip is resonating with respect to the beta naught value. So where this energy difference between the two nuclear spin state, that is alpha or beta, is given as h nu. This h nu, delta E is equal to h nu, is given with respect to it is directly proportional to the external magnetic field, the Planck's constant, and a term called as gyromagnetic ratio, which is given as gamma. This gyromagnetic ratio depends upon the type of the proton that is involved. Right? So you can see the proton is having higher gyromagnetic ratio than the carbon, C13 carbon. So this gyromagnetic ratio depends upon the magnetic moment of the nucleus, as well as its magnetic spin quantum number of that particular nucleus. Based upon that, this gyromagnetic ratio depends, and based upon this gyromagnetic ratio only, the energy difference between the lower nuclear spin state and the higher energy nuclear spin state exist, which is seen in when you apply it on an external magnetic field. You can see, so the low energy state, the plus half state is given as alpha, the high energy state is given as beta. So when you apply a radio frequency, right, the spin state, right, the spin state flips and it goes to a antiparallel state. Flipping of the spin occurs when a radio frequency is subject to it. So spin state from here jumps to this particular spin state, right, when it absorbs energy, and when it comes back to the ground state, right, it releases energy again, that is equal to delta E, right. This process is called relaxation. So ground and excited state for nucleus, that is for a proton undergoing magnetic resonance. So this particular when the radio frequency that is applied matches to the energy difference between the two spin state in an external magnetic field, that is called as resonance, and the energy released during relaxation of that particular nuclear state is called as a resonance energy that is being detected in a nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy. So absorption of energy produces an alignment against the magnetic field, and the difference between the two between the number of protons, that is number of protons in low energy state, that is alpha state, and beta state is very small. So the low energy state jumps to the high energy state, that is what happens. So the wavelength what you use is a low energy radio frequencies. Radio waves is used, which whose energies are given in terms of hertz, which is nothing but which is a unit of frequency, that is c by lambda. C is your speed of light and lambda is the wavelength of the frequency that is being used, right? So low energy radio frequencies are used in NMR spectroscopy. The stronger the magnetic field applied, the greater the radiation frequency in hertz. So as the energy of the as the strength of the external magnetic field increases, the difference between the nuclear spin states increases, so the frequency of radiation that has to be used is also increased, that is required for aligning the nuclear spin against the magnetic field. The strength of the magnetic field that is being used in NMR spectroscopy is between range of 1.4 Tesla to 14 Tesla, and the frequency which is used in this range is between 600 megahertz to 60 megahertz to 600 megahertz. That is 600 megahertz when you have applying a 14 Tesla magnetic field, and 60 megahertz when you are applying a 1.4 Tesla magnetic field kind of thing. So 600 megahertz instrument causes a proton to resonate a frequency at a 600 frequency of 600 megahertz and at higher magnetic field strength, that is at 14 Tesla magnetic field strength. So that increases the sensitivity, that is number of protons from the low alpha state going to the higher beta state is more. That is, the sensitivity for 600 megahertz instrument will be higher, where one proton population difference between alpha and state will be 1 in 10,000, but in case of 60 megahertz it is 1 in 1 lakh. So that is, there's a 10-fold increase in sensitivity with respect to a higher magnetic field NMR instrument, which uses a higher radio frequency of around 600 megahertz. So what kind of nuclei are active for this NMR spectroscopy? Not all nuclei are not active. So there are very few nuclei which are active. Basically studied are about proton, that is H1 NMR and C13 NMR, but there are many other NMRs that can be used, like P31, N15, F19, like that. So but majorly used is C13 and H1, that is in organic chemistry kind of thing. The natural abundance of proton, that is H1, is around 99%. That of C13, which is the active form of carbon for NMR, that is only 1.1%. But the C12, which is 98.9%, this C12 carbon is not NMR active. So what is the criteria for NMR active or NMR inactive nuclei kind of thing? So NMR active nuclei, their nuclear spin state, that is nuclear spin quantum number, which is given as I, is considered for the NMR activity of any particular nuclei. So the number of this number of spin states that can exist due to with respect to particular spin quantum number is 2i plus 1. That is number of possible energy levels. So if the spin quantum number is half, so number of levels you can have is 2 into half plus 1, that is 1 plus 1, that is 2 states. That is for nuclei with half spin state will give you 2 possible energy levels, that is alpha and beta, right? So as the I value changes, the number of possible spin states will also change. So a nuclei with even number of neutrons and even number of protons, that is having a mass nuclei, even mass and having a even number of protons, then the spin quantum number for that particular nucleus is 0. And such kind of nuclei, they are NMR inactive. Nuclei or a atom which is having even mass and have odd number of neutrons have an integer spin values of I, that is 1, 2 and 3. These are also NMR active. And odd mass nuclei, that is atoms having odd mass number, odd atomic mass, and they have a spin quantum number of integer value, half integers, that is 1 by 2, 3 by 2, 5 by 2. So these are some examples of NMR active, right? So where I is equal to half, like proton, C13, F19, P31, where I is equal to 1, that is the integer value, deuterium, N14, right? Even in half you got N15 also is half. I 3 by 2 you got Cl, Cl37, Cl35, both are, all these are NMR active. They have I value is greater than 0. Any nuclei where I value is equal to 0 like C12 and O16, they are NMR inactive. So the criteria for NMR active nuclei is that I should not be equal to 0. I should be greater than 0. So there are some spin properties of nuclei. Like you can see H1, H2, what are the spin numbers, their natural abundance, their magnetic moment, and their gyromagnetic ratio. As I already told you, gyromagnetic ratio depends upon the magnetic moment and the spin quantum number based upon and their charges kind of. Now coming to the instrumentation part for NMR, so there are different instruments being used. The basic instrument that was used is continuous wave nuclear magnetic resonance spectrophotometer. This is a schematic diagram for the continuous wave nuclear magnetic resonance spectrophotometer. So this the sample is taken a sample tube, NMR tube. This is called as, which is in which the sample is taken in liquid form with a suitable solvent. The basically used solvents are deuterated solvents, which are in case of C13 and proton NMR, deuterated solvents are used, like CDCl3 and methanol D4 or DMSO D6. These are deuterated solvents that are being used here. So this sample is placed in an NMR tube in between two magnets, that is, which are in a magnetic field, external magnetic field, which is having a sweep coils, which will generate a particular magnetic fields around this sample tube, and this tube is coiled along with is a receiver coil, which receives the detects this absorption of radio frequency. So the radio frequency is provided through a transmitter which is kept perpendicular to the sample tube as well as the magnetic field actually in Y plane. The magnetic field is along the Y axis, right? So transmitter radio frequency is transmitted through this to the sample. So sample absorbs the radio frequency. If the radio frequency matches the energy difference between the spin states in the particular magnetic field, once it is absorbing, when it undergoes relaxation, there occurs a release of energy that is detected by this radio receiver coil, and that is been detected, amplified and recorded to give us the spectra. Nowadays, much advanced NMR spectrophotometer is used, where FT, Fourier transformation NMR instruments are used, where pulse signal is being used rather than a continuous wave radio frequencies that been used. So how the NMR signal is collected is nothing but the NMR signal is detected on the XY plane. So we already seen how the transmitter is kept on the x-axis and the signal is collected along this. So the signal is detected around the XY plane, not and because the magnetic field is on the z-axis. So the oscillation of the MX, that is the magnetization that is generated during the field, that is detected by the coil, and which is the NMR signal that is occurring during the relaxation process, right? So when you apply a radio frequency, there will be change in spin of the nuclei, and when it is coming back to its actual state, it releases the energy, and that is being detected, right? So if there is no relaxation, the peak will be a constant one, there will not change. But if there is a relaxation, that is, there is a time gap, right? You get such kind of signal, wave signal, that has been obtained, which is actually called as a free induction decay, because there is a time delay signal. There is a time delay for the relaxation. It's a slow process, so signal decay occurs. So that has been detected, and this FID, which is obtained, that is converted into an NMR signal kind of thing, right? So the time FID, that is free induction decay, which is a time dependent scale, that is converted into a frequency dependent one using a mathematical transformation that is called as Fourier transformation based upon this particular, and then you get a NMR plot, which is frequency based plot. So this frequency that you get, so based upon the proton or the nuclei which is undergoing the resonance there, so it has a particular frequency. So that is explained or studied with respect to a concept called as chemical shift. So chemical shift is the resonant frequency of a nucleus related to a standard in a magnetic field, right? So the whatever signal that has been given by a particular sample is related or correlated to a particular reference sample in the NMR experiment, right? So the reference that has been used basically for a proton NMR is TMS, that is tetramethyl silane, or trimethyl silyl propanoic acid is the references that is been used. Majorly used is TMS, tetramethyl silane, which is gives there is no chemical shift there. It has a chemical shift value of 0. So all the samples are with respect to this TMS signal, that is 0, it is taken, and whatever the chemical shift value what you get is based upon this. So the variation of nuclear magnetic resonance frequency for same kind of nuclei in a particular atom molecule which are having a variation electron distribution is called the chemical shift. So size of the chemical shift, that is the quantity of chemical shift, is given with respect to a reference frequency. This reference frequency is for this particular reference, and that is given as delta, which is with respect to the frequency of sample, at what frequency sample is absorbing, minus the frequency of the reference at which it is absorbing, divided by the frequency at which the instrument is being working. That is, if it is 600 megahertz instrument that is being used, so here it will be 600 megahertz. What you obtain here is frequency is only in hertz, but the instrument frequency is in megahertz, right? And the chemical shift values are expressed in terms of ppms, parts per million kind of. So there are three major factors that influences this chemical shift. That is inductive effect caused by the electronegative groups attached to the molecule, deshielding caused around a particular proton or nuclei due to the electron density around it, shielding or deshielding process, and another one is the anisotropic effect, that is due to magnetic field generated by the pi electron cloud or in the particular molecular system. So you have a when you have a shielded proton, right? The proton is shielded by either an electronic environment or magnetic field. It causes an upfield, means it requires a low energy frequencies to resonate. So it gives an upfield that is near to zero. So this is called as an upfield shift. And if a proton is deshielded, it is not shielded, but it gets more influenced by the external magnetic field, then the frequency it requires to resonate also increases. So it goes to called as downfield shift. So why this? What is this shielding and deshielding concept? So when a proton is present in different chemical environment, the electronic environment of that proton also influences. So if a proton is a nucleus is totally surrounded by an electronic cloud, which will interfere with its with the nuclear spin interaction with the external magnetic field, because the electron itself is also a tiny magnet. So this magnetic field will shield the nuclear spin from the external magnetic field. So if electron density around a proton is more, that means it will be shielding the proton from the external magnetic. But if there is no electron density around the nuclei, if an electroactive atom is attached to the carbon, it will pull away the electron from the proton. So that leads to decrease of electron density around the proton. So that will make it to be more influenced by the external magnetic field. So that will go for a downfield shift. So the electron density around the atom and that is the proton will cause the shielding and deshielding effects, and that will affect its absorbance radio frequencies also, right? So the proton which is shielded by electron density, that is which is not in range in near proximity of any electronegative atom, then it will have a lower delta value, right? Lower chemical shift values. But if the proton is deshielded, it is not having any electron density near it because of presence of electronegative groups or electron withdrawing groups or a pi system kind of thing, which is pull away the electrons from the proton, then the proton will become deshielded. It will have a direct influence from the external magnetic field. So the chemical shift value also increases. Right, so these are the some approximate chemical shift values for non-aromatic protons attached to a carbon, like you can say methyl proton, which is not near to any electronegative group, will be almost resonating near to zero value, that is TMS 0.9. So like as the electronegative atom comes near to it, the ppm value also increases. So this is the CH3 proton here. It has shifted from 0.9 to 1. So downfield shift is seen when you have an electronegative group present near to it. So you have a pi system there, so 1.6. So as the electronic environment changes, there will be change in the ppm values also. These are some standard approximate values for the proton resonance frequencies for some of the protons. You can see for electronegative groups also, like X with respect to fluorine, oxygen, chlorine, bromine, the methyl proton that resonates at different frequencies. You can see fluorine, it shows the higher resonance frequency around 4.26. That's ppm. Electronegativity is 4, so chemical shift value is coming near to 4.26. So you can see hydrogen, its electronegativity is 2.1, so chemical shift is only 0.2, and for silicon, if you take, it's almost 0. And so electronegativity, how it influences the chemical shift values for a particular proton. These are chemical shift values for aromatic protons based upon substitutions and position of the substitutions. The proton resonance frequency will also change accordingly. So it's nearer to the 7. If you take the chemical shift value of a pure benzene to around 7.27 region, so based upon the substitutions, there will be a particular plus or minus change for a particular proton in this particular directions. The third effect we said is an anisotropic effect, right? So that is the pi electron system that creates an electronic cloud. Like in case of benzene, if you take, there's a pi electron system generating above the plane and below the plane. These protons are not in this electronic plane, right? So they are away from this electronic plane, so they are not shielded by this electronic cloud. So these protons are having a direct influence towards the external magnetic field. So they show a high frequency, that is the chemical shift value is very high for these particular protons. Same is case with an alkene group also. The pi electron cloud is not shielding the proton is de-shielded, so this causes it to be resonating at higher frequency kind of thing. But if you take alene molecule, right, alkyne kind of thing, where the proton is in the electronic cloud of this particular proton, so this proton here is shielded. So because it is shielded, it shows an upfield shift. The chemical shift value has been upfield kind of thing, right? So here this is a pi electron cloud with respect to a C double bond group. That's why it shows a 9 to 10 ppm shift values here. So this is an anisotropic effect that is based upon the electronic cloud around the proton system. How the proton is existing in that electronic cloud will affect its chemical shift value. So anisotropy itself says a non-uniform electronic cloud kind of thing. Right, so these are some functional groups. At what frequencies they'll give a chemical NMR signal. So their chemical shift values approximate chemical shift values for the functional groups. Let's see some examples here. So this is acetone. We have got 2 methyl groups which resonate around 2 ppm for the 6 hydrogens. Acetone, if you see, you got 2 methyls and 1 methylene group, right? So the 2 methyls resonate at around 2 ppm, and the 2 CH2 group resonates around 2.4. For dimethylamine, the 2 methyl groups resonates at 2 and 2.4 is for one of the methyl group there. That is, this is at 2.2, it is at 2, and these two are at 2.4 because it attached to nitrogen. It is gone for an upfield shift here. Ethyl acetate, if you see, the 2 methyl, that is 1.3 for this methyl, 3 hydrogens, 2 for this methyl hydrogens, and 4.2 for this methylene hydrogen, right? So toluene, if you take, the methyl group is resonating at around 2.3, and acetophenone, which is at oxygen, it is, the methyl group is resonating at 2.6 for 3 hydrogens, right? So how we can say that the signal, that is, it was 3 hydrogens or 6 hydrogens kind of thing, that is based upon the integration of the NMR signal what you get. So the integration of the area under the peak for a particular resonating signal is proportional, that is, the area under the peak is proportional to the number of protons present in that particular group, functional group. So how many protons are absorbing at that particular region, the area of the signal will correspond to that particular number of protons, right? So if you see for this peak, it shows for 2 hydrogens, right? 2 hydrogens here, the peak area on the curve, this is higher, so this is corresponding to 3 hydrogens. So this is how the integration is used. But here what we can see here, so one concept, so we were seeing here that methyl groups here, right, this is methyl group and this is another methyl group for acetylene, but they do resonate at different frequencies, right? Here also in dimethylamine acetamide also, this methyl group and these two methyl groups resonate at the same frequency, but this resonated at different frequency. Why the methyl groups were resonating? So these are called as equivalent and non-equivalent protons. So in this particular methyl group, all the 3 hydrogens are equivalent hydrogens, so they resonate at the same frequency, but this methyl group to this methyl group, they are different, so they are called as non-equivalent protons kind of thing. So you have got equivalent protons and non-equivalent protons. So based upon that, based upon their chemical environment or their electronic environment, their chemical shift values also changes. So because of their non-identical environmental electronic environment. So if you take this, so this HA protons, what you see, they are chemically equivalent protons. HB are, these HBs are chemically equivalent proton, but HA and HB are non-equivalent protons. So they resonate at different frequencies kind of thing, right? Similarly, if you take for the aromatic system, the H1 to H2 is not chemically equivalent. H1 and H2 will be different, but H1 and H5, they have a similar chemical environment, so they're chemically equivalent protons. So like that, you can differentiate the protons based upon the chemical environment as equivalent and non-equivalent protons based upon the chemical and electronic environment. Right, so based upon this non-equivalent and equivalent protons, you get the different signals kind of thing. But again, what we are seeing in the signal is there are multiple lines in this particular signal, right? You can see three signals here, three lines here, right? Here you got a signal line. So what is this? So this tells about the multiplicity of the signal. So this arises from the non-equivalent protons near to the equivalent one particular set of protons. So each proton signal is split into two or more lines based upon presence of different functional groups near to it. Like if you take it for this example, the methyl group, right? These are three protons, right? So which is resonating here, right? Which shows 1, 2 and 3 lines here. So the 3 lines is due to its interaction with the neighboring CH2 proton. Right, so this interaction of CH3 with CH2, this is called as a spin-spin coupling. Right, the spin of this proton is interacting with the spin of this proton, leading to a multiplicity, that is splitting of the NMR signal. So this is called as spin-spin coupling, which leads to multiplicity in a particular signal. And the rule followed here for spin multiplicity is n+1 rule, where n is the number of neighboring protons. So if you take the signal of methyl group here, CH3, it is interacting with the neighboring proton that is having 2 protons here. So number of neighboring protons is 2. So 2 + 1 is 3 lines. Right, so it gives you 3 lines here. So if you take this methylene group, which resonates at this particular region, right? So its neighboring proton, there are 3 neighboring protons with respect to this methyl group, right? So 3 + 1, 4. So it should show 4 lines. You see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So that is the spin multiplicity for a particular multiplicity state for a spin-spin coupling. So how this spin-spin coupling occurs? How this multiplicity is coming? That is the interaction of one proton spin with the another proton spin attached to the neighboring carbon atom, and where the multiplicity L is given as n+1, where L is number of lines in the coupling pattern and n is the number of neighboring protons, right? And so you can see the splitting pattern follows a pattern called as Pascal's triangle. This gives you the possible interaction, that is if n value is 0, there is no neighboring protons, only one single line, singlet is seen. If there are one neighboring proton, you see a doublet which have a equal intensity, that is 1:1. If number of neighboring protons are 2, it shows an intensity of 1:2:1, that is 3 lines what you get, right? And the intensity is how it is. So how this intensities or the lines is obtained, right? For example, we will see again a spectra of here of ethyl acetate, right? So you got 3 types of protons here, that is a CH3, CH2 and a CH3, right? So this CH3 is at the downfield, upfield, which is near to TMS, right? It shows a triplet because it is adjacent to methylene group, 2 protons, so it gives a triplet here, right? 3 lines. The CH2 is here at because it adds to oxygen and electronegative group, so it goes to downfield shift. So here it shows 4 lines, a quartet, due to its interaction with 3 protons. That gives you 4 lines in the NMR signal. And this methyl A, which is attached to carbon, but it doesn't has any neighboring protons, so it shows a single line at 2.03, right? So how the interaction there occurs? So if you take the CH3 proton, which is interacting with the CH2 proton, right? So all the protons will interact. That is one spin state. This is for your CH2 interacting with CH3, CH2, CH3, CH2, CH3, CH2, CH3, right? So possible combinations, what you get is this. So that gives you the 1:2:1 ratio of intensity is there. But if you take the CH3 interacting, the CH2 interacting with the CH3, that is the CH2 methylene proton its NMR signal is getting coupled with the CH3 protons, so it should give a quart for us, right? So how the quart intensity is here, see, so 1 proton of methylene interacting with 3 protons of methyl, right? So one here in this, both the spin states are aligned. In this case, both the spin state are aligned, but in opposite direction, and these are different combinations. So almost 3 combinations you will get for here. For this state, that is for this particular CH2 group, you have got this particular state, and this spin state has got this. So total of 3 different types of interactions you will see here, and 3 different types of interaction here. So total ratio you will get is 1:3:3:1. This is how the Pascal triangle also depicts for it, right? So the interaction, the line splitting there, it's called as the coupling constant, and it is given as in hertz. So the range of coupling constant is between, for a particular proton, is between 0 to 20 hertz, and this is coupling constant J is the measure of interaction between a pair of protons. So this is how the actual spectra of methyl acetate looks, right? Now the multiplicity also changes with respect to how the interactions are. There's like 2 different sets of neighboring protons are there. So first one set will interact with the proton, and then the next set. So multiplicity will be increasing based upon that, right? For in case if you see this particular CH2 proton, which has got 2 different set of neighboring protons, one is a methyl with CH3 and another methylene with CH2, so its interaction will change. So if you take this, it is showing a multiple, right? Multiple protons here. That is how first it will interact with CH3, then it might interact with CH2, or vice versa. So number of lines will be increasing for it, right? So normally it has got 5 neighboring protons, a total of 6 peaks. It should 6 lines it should show you. So how the 6th line, that depends upon how it is interacting it with the system, neighboring protons kind of thing. And so let's see some examples for drug molecules with respect to NMR spectra. So this is the NMR spectra of paracetamol, which is taken in methanol D, that is CD3OD. Right. So as I already told, the solvents that is being used in NMR, proton NMR spectroscopy, is deuterated solvents, because the interaction of solvent, if solvent is taken in higher concentrations, if protons are present in that will mask the actual NMR signals of the sample. So that's why deuterated samples are being solvents are used, because in deuterated solvents the solvent peak is the deuterated solvent that will show very less intensity, and it doesn't resonate, and so it shows negligible signals. Only the proton signals from the sample are being detected. So that's why deuterated solvents are used. So this is the NMR spectra for paracetamol, where you can see the methyl showing a peak at 2.07 ppm value, and it is a singlet because there is no neighboring proton here. Then you see a solvent peak, that is the OH group here. It is undergoing a shift proton exchange if it occurs, so that methanol D shows a peak around 4.8 kind of thing, right? Then because it is a deuterated methanol D is in use, the NH proton is not visible in the NMR spectra. If it had been a CDCl3, this NH proton would have been detected around this particular region between 4 to 5. This OH will be seen beyond 9 if it is a CDCl3. Now, more importantly to be checked is these 2 protons, H1 and H4, which are chemically equivalent. H2 and H3 are chemically equivalent. So 1 and 4, 2 protons give a signal around 6.74 and 6.71. This is due to the interaction, that is 2 protons coupled with this CH2, that is giving a doublet signal. Same way H2 will interact with H1. These H2 and H3 are chemically equivalent, so their neighboring protons is 1, so there will be interaction here, so giving a doublet kind of thing. And so this is the NMR spectra for paracetamol in methanol D solvent with reference to TMS. This is for aspirin, right? You can see, which is again taken in methanol D solvent. You can see the acid peak will be seen around 10 or 11. The methyl of acetyl group is seen around 2.28. It's a singlet because no neighboring protons. The H1 and the H4 here will be different. So all the 4 aromatic protons are different. So all the 4 shows different signals in the NMR, that is in the aromatic region between 7 to 8. You can see H4, which shows a signal at doublet because it is interacting with H3. Then H1 is higher field, it shows around 8 to 8.3. It is again a doublet because it is interacting with H2. But H2 and H3, they interact, H2 interacts with H1 and H3, so it shows multiple triplet here. And H3 also shows a triplet here because H3 is also interacting with H2 and H4. So it shows a triplet. This is NMR spectrum for salbutamol, right? So you can see the methyl proton, 3 methyls, all the 3, so shows a singlet. Right, so the CH3 peaks, right, they show at around between 1.3 around region, right? The NH proton is not seen because it is taken in CD3OD. Then you have the CH2, right? It is adjacent to 2 neighboring protons, that is H and H here, so it shows a multiplets because of its different interaction with the H and the NH there. The aromatic, this particular CH2, right, that is seen around this, that is around 4.6. The 3 aromatic protons is seen here. The one, it shows a singlet around 7.3. The 2 shows a doublet at 7.1, and the 3 shows a doublet at around 6.9 kind of, right? So this is the spectra of salbutamol, what you can see here. This is the spectra for phenylephrine, right? So you can see the nature of that, the singlet for A proton, that is methyl proton, 3 protons, that is seen at this 2.8 region. Then a multiplet, doublet, multiplet for 2 hydrogens, that is for this particular proton there, that is for B. And so these 2 protons, they interacts with this NH as well as this H, shows a multiplet around 3.4 here, right? The D proton, that is this particular proton, shows a triplet possible because 2 hydrogens it interacts, so it shows a triplet signal here, that is D, right? Then we have the aromatic protons that are seen in this particular region between 6.8 to 7 point region. So that shows different signals here. So you can see it says E is having 5 is E signal, that is a singlet because there is no interactions here, right? So it is coming, this is a singlet for this E. Then you have got 6 is F, that is this should be a doublet, right, this is a doublet. Then you have got 7 is G, that is this G, that is 7 is a triplet because it interacts with this fluorine, this hydrogen and this hydrogen. Then H is 4, that is, it should be a doublet here, so that is been seen in this case. And if a water exists in the spectrum, it shows a peak with respect to methanol around this particular 4.8 region only. This is NMR spectrum, if you can produce it, right, this is for benzocaine. These are the NMR values for it. The proton, this gives at 1.3, it will be a triplet because it is interacting with the 2 protons here. The methylene proton will give a quartet at around 4.1. The aromatic protons, if you take, right, at 7.73, you will get a doublet proton for C and D because both are chemically equivalent. E and F protons are chemically equivalent. They also show doublet on 6.1 region. This is for phenacetin. It shows a singlet for the methyl proton here. Should be yeah, it shows a singlet, see, at 2. This is the first G, which shows a triplet at 1.3, right? Then the F proton around 4.1, that is for 2 protons, and quadruplet because this is interacting with the 3 methyl and methyl protons. Then the aromatic protons comes in, where 2 hydrogens, that is D and E, these two are chemically equivalent protons. They are seen at 6.74, at 7.05 to a doublet for this B and C protons. The doublet is due to this interacting with this, or this interacting with this. This is the NMR spectra for spectral values for chlorofluoride. So the first one will be the triplet for the methyl, then the quadruplet for this methylene group, right? You will get a quadruplet for this around 4.1. This then you have singlets. This also gives a singlet because there is no neighboring proton around 1.3 for 6. This C and this C, these two methyl groups, they are chemically equivalent, so they give 1.3 6 hydrogens there, right? Then the aromatic protons come, so your H and so this D and E are same, and your F and H are same, F and G are same, right? So at 7.18 a doublet is seen for F and G protons, and at 6.7 for 2 protons, the D N proton shows a doublet. Next we'll look into this C13 NMR, that is the proton, the nucleus there is of a carbon C13, which is a spin of plus half. The C12, that is the normal form of carbon, doesn't shows any NMR activity, but the allotrope C13, which has got a natural abundance of 1.1% only, shows NMR active. It is but less sensitive, around 400 times less sensitive than the hydrogen nucleus due to its low abundance. It also shows no CC coupling like the spin-spin coupling of hydrogen. There is no CC coupling for CC spin coupling for this C13 NMR. The range, chemical shift range also is between 0 to 220 ppm. For proto NMR it is basically 0 to 15 ppm, but for C13 NMR it is between 0 to 220 ppm. The chemical shifts are also here, also it is measured with respect to tetramethylsilane TMS only, and the factors affecting here also are similar to that of proto NMR, but only thing is that there are long relaxation times, and the peak area normally doesn't integrates towards the number of carbons that is existing here. They are broader peak-like shapes, so they show single lines kind of thing, right? And every line indicates one type of carbon atom there. So these are different chemical shift values for carbon atoms in different range. You can see the range is from around the normal aliphatic protons, they are seen from 5 to 20 ppm. With the different, as electronegativity atom increases there, right, attached to it, the ppm value also undergoes a downfield shift, right? It's a low frequency kind of thing, right? So as you go on, you can see between 17 to 200 ppm frequency value also changes there. So they resonate at a very low frequencies. That's why it is going around 220 ppm values. So C13 NMR spectrum of salbutamol. You can see the lines are shown above and below for clarity kind of. CH3 carbon, C methyl carbon is shown and down, and CH is shown down, and C and CH2 carbons are shown up. So here also you can see based upon the equivalent non-equivalent proton, you can here also you got the proton carbons. These C carbons, that is A carbon, show a peak here at around 20 or 30 ppm. Then this particular carbon, that is B, that shows around here 50 ppm. It is got mixed up with the solvent peak. Then the carbon here, so it is directly attached to this carbon, so it shows near to 55 ppm. Then you have got this proton, this carbon, which is showing here around 60 ppm. Then this carbon which is attached to oxygen and the aromatic ring system, so it shows around 75 ppm values kind of thing. Then the aromatic region is between 100 to 150 ppm, right? You can see the proton, this particular carbon, that is this carbon is seen around 120 here, right? The 4 which is attached, this particular carbon which is attached to oxygen and in the phenyl, so it shows around 150. The one is here, right? First carbon, the second carbon and the sixth carbon, they're almost similar, so they show here this particular, that is for both 2 and 6 carbon. So this is how the C13 NMR spectra looks like. The frequency range, the ppm value is from 0 to 200 range. You see only lines kind of thing, a broad spectra is seen kind of here, right? So this is another example of Procaine for its C13 spectra. You can see the A, that is around 10 ppm. You get the methyl protons here, that is seen here at 11.1. Then B protons around 51.1, right? Then the C carbon, sorry, it's not proton, 52.9. Then the D carbon, DC13, that is seen around 61.6, right? The E, that is E carbon, that is attached to oxygen as well as to the aromatic ring system, that shows around 170, that is around here. Then the F, F is around 119, that is the aromatic region, right? H, 2 H's, right? So that is 117. This is G, 134. Then I, that is this particular carbon, right? That shows around 155 because it is attached to nitrogen and the aromatic system, so it shows around 155 kind of thing. The other spectra is the two-dimensional spectra, which is also used in pharmaceutical analysis. Now, 2D NMR is a set of nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy method, which gives a data plotted in space defined by two frequency axes. That is, both the frequency axes, you have got chemical shift values, and you try to correlate between the proton values. So there are different methods there, like COSY, that is proton correlation spectroscopy, total correlation spectroscopy, long range correlation spectroscopy, and there are different methods. So these are all different methods of 2D NMR kind of thing. The basic concept here is a sequence of radio frequency pulse with the delayed periods in between them is applied. There is two different frequencies, that two pulses are applied. The timing, frequencies, and intensity of these pulses distinguish the different NMR methods. The methods what you listed, they have this, how they are applied, at what time applied, and how they are measured. That is being changed in the different 2D NMR methods. But almost all of them have got basic 4 stages. That is the preparation period, where a magnetization correlation, that is first a magnetic field is applied through a set of RF pulse. So first pulse is applied, right? So that is the preparation period, right? Then evolution period is given for a particular time period. After the RF frequency, the protons nucleus been allowed to freely rotate, and then a mixing period, a second pulse is applied during the mixing period P2, and after this, after the second pulse is applied, after the free decay, then the FID is been detected and Fourier transformed, and it is detected. So this is a basic 4 steps involved in any two-dimensional spectra. So this is a two-dimensional spectra for aspirin that you can see, right? So as I said, there are frequency ppm values are plotted in both x and y axis, and the correlation between the protons are being checked. So that's why it is called as a correlation spectroscopy. So the relation, how the proton to proton, how the interaction is there, you can relate between one proton to proton, with how many protons it is interacting, and what kind of interaction it is existing here. So you can see the 4 aromatic protons, what you see, how they are interacting with each other, right? That it can be clearly seen in this particular at 2D NMR spectra. So these are called as contours, where the interaction, or you can see, like if you see this particular plot, that is how the interaction frequency of A to A, that is this is the same proton, so which comes diagonally. But if you move here, how the A proton is interacting with the C proton, right? So it interacts. So you can see A is interacting with only C. There are no interaction graph with B or D. So it shows which proton is interacting with which carbon, which particular another proton, neighboring proton. So that is clearly seen with this two-dimensional spectroscopy. So if you see HC, C proton and B proton, right? So you got C, the B proton is interacting with D proton as well as C proton, right? So B is interacting with D and C, right? Now in case of C, it is interacting with D as well as A as well, right? So it shows very small interaction with D. So that is a long range coupling there, but it's strong interaction with B and A, right? So that's where it is basically interacting with. And if you see D also shows a very small, and as the C is interacting with it, there's a small interaction with here, right? Between D and C, long range meta coupling it is called as. But basic interaction, more interaction is with B. So this tells how the proton are interacting with each other, how the spin correlation is there between the protons in a particular molecule. So this helps in resolving the kind of interactions in an NMR data for a clear information. For instance, you take this tranexamic acid, right? It is a cyclohexyl group, right? So you have a two different on a particular carbon itself, one carbon itself, there are two different types of hydrogen. That is, you have an axial proton as well as you have got an equatorial proton. So these two protons are also chemically non-equivalent. So they give a very complex spectrum to see how the interaction is there. So which proton is interacting with which, that can be analyzed using a two-dimensional NMR spectrum. Because in 1D NMR, this interaction, correlation between one proton to another proton is not seen. Right, so if you see the correlation 2D NMR spectra for this tranexamic acid, you can see how the equatorial proton is interacting with other protons. So you can see for this particular proton, right, how it is interacting with this particular proton, right, 4 and 4 prime. So what is this 4 and 4 prime? If you come, 4 prime is this CH2 proton, right, and 4 is this proton. So how these two are interacting, right? And this and how this will interact with this, that is being seen from this spectra. So the 4 prime and 4 are only interacting with this, and if you take the one proton number 1, right, it is interacting with 2 equatorial and 2 axial, right? So what is this? That is one proton number 1, where it is 1 1 1. So what the proton existing here, that should be somewhere yeah, H1 here, right? So this how it is interacting with 2 equatorial and 2 axial, right? So you got H2 here, right? These two are H2s only. So you got equatorial. So how this is interacting with this and how this is interacting with this, right? So that is seen in this particular region, 2 equatorial and 2 axial, right? So same way for each and every proton, you can detect how to which all it has been interacting, right? So that clearly indicates from this how the correlation or how the spin-spin coupling between protons is can be clearly identified from the 2D NMR spectra. The other important application of NMR spectroscopy is the quantitative analysis. So it can be used for quantitative analysis by by using a method called as internal standard method. So it is for a specific quantitative technique where internal standard method is being used. So a drug can be rapidly quantified by measuring suitable protons. So for a particular drug, if you select a particular proton and try to determine its intensity and related to an internal standard that has been added to it, you can calculate its amount. So so basically some example, as an example we'll see isolated methyl proton which is studied against an internal standard a singlet which is used through a tertiary butanol. So this is tertiary butanol which is used as internal standard when methyl protons are detected for quantitative analysis. So all the three it gives a singlet kind of thing, right? So its peak intensity will be correlated to the peak intensity of the respective methyl proton which is under analysis. Let's say if you take aspirin or paracetamol or codeine, right, you have got a methyl proton here, specific methyl protons, right? So isolated methyl protons which are singlet in nature, not a doublet or multiple, but singlet in nature, which don't interact with others, they are considered. So a singlet proton, so the peak area under the peak, as we know, they correspond to the methyl protons, and that again depends upon the concentration of the particular sample that is being taken. So the formula here applied is amount of drug is equal to area of signal of drug proton. That is, if you take aspirin as the drug proton, so how much of area is given, area of under the curve for that area, particular methyl proton, right, for aspirin, by area of signal of internal standard. So internal standard is given here, right? So what is the area covered by that internal standard proton, right, into mass of internal standard added. So how much amount of internal standard you are adding, that you take, then the molecular weight of drug into by divided by molecular weight of internal standard by number of protons in internal standard by number of protons in the drug. Number of protons in internal standard is 9 and number of protons in the drug that you are taking is CH3. 3 protons kind of. So based upon this formula, you can calculate the quantitatively calculate the amount of drug sample present in a particular sample. So in this particular example, you can clearly identify the amount of aspirin as well as amount of paracetamol with a single experiment. But the error in the quantitative analysis of coordinate will be less because the peak area under the peak for this is very, very small. So quantitative, the error will be more in this particular case. But aspirin and paracetamol can be detected very effectively. So as an example, we'll see that is where we can see if we take the content of the tablet, that is aspirin, if you say the tablet one tablet consists of 250 mg, the weight of the tablet is taken, the one tablet, let's say it weighs 0.6425 grams. From you powder that particular tablet, and from that you take a small amount of the sample, 0.128 grams of the sample is taken. To that around 8 mg, that is 0.008 grams of the internal standard, that is tertiary butanol is added to it as a internal standard. Now you measure the NMR signal and you take the area of the peak, what you get for the internal standard as well as the methyl proton of the aspirin. So the area for the internal standard is around 7.2 and that of methyl peak for aspirin was around 5.65. The molecular weight T, tertiary butanol, is around 74 point. Molecular weight of aspirin is around 8.2. These you substitute in this particular formula, right? So what you get, the amount of aspirin is around 0.4528 grams. It has been obtained. So where you can say this is area of the peak of CH3 proton from aspirin, this is area of a peak of internal standard, amount of mass of internal standard taken, right? And then mass of drug, molecular weight of the drug, that is aspirin, that is 180.2, molecular weight of internal standard 71.3, and 3 is the number of protons of from the aspirin, and 9 is the number of protons from internal standard, right? So you get this particular value. So aspirin, one tablet, how much it is containing? Around 241 grams. So if it is from 1.28 grams, you have got 0.0428 grams of aspirin. So 0.6425 grams of tablet will have how much of aspirin? So it comes around 241 grams. So the percentage purity, if you take experimental versus calculated ones, then you will get around 96.2 grams pure percentage purity is obtained for this particular sample. So the other specified applications of NMR, right? Like it is used for chiral NMR also, where europium complex are used for separating chiral molecules. They are for determination of enantiomers and mixtures from quantification. Solid state NMR is used for determining the crystal amorphous forms, polymorphs in a particular pharmaceutical compositions. Biological NMR is used for determining drug toxicities or other metabolites in a particular drug examination. Like HPLC, NMR is also used for studying drug metabolites chromatographically or everything. Then NMR is also, in conjunction with chemometry, is also used for determining toxicities, kind of thing, right? And another major application of NMR is in diagnostic sector, that is used as magnetic resonance imaging, the MRI. That is the well-known technique which is applied in diagnosis using NMR signal. So you can go through this particular book for all your details. Thank you.